Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being with us here today. We're just going to give a few more minutes to let everyone join the event. So we'll just kick off in around 20 seconds. Great. So I'll begin. I see there's still a few people joining, but just in the interest of time, I might just kick off anyway. So to introduce myself, my name is Anna Wallace. I work in the Women's Health Taskforce in the Department of Health. And along with the Civil Service Employee Assistance Service, we're organising this event today. So we're really delighted to see so many of you on this call today and the appetite that there exists within the civil service to discuss this really important topic. So just before we begin, I'm going to speak through some pointers on what to expect from today's session and how you can contribute as well. So we have almost 800 registered attendees today, and I see the number at present is 700, almost 400 in the room with us today. So great to have you all here. There's a Q&A function just at the bottom, so we welcome any comments or questions there. Due to the amount of people that there is attending, we won't be able to answer all of the questions, but we'll take them on board for planning for future events and we'll bear everything in mind. So please do feel free to put in any comments or any questions, anything that comes to mind there. So we'd be really interested to hear from you. And then secondly, just to mention that this is intended as a first step conversation on menopause and civil service with a specific focus on menopause at work. So we'll hold some time for you to share your thoughts and answer some questions at the end as well. So looking forward to hearing from you directly there. Please have your phone handy as well. So we'll be using a Mentimeter, so you can answer questions and contribute directly through your phone then. So I'll just speak through the running order for today then. So today we have opening words from the Department of Defence Secretary General, Jackie McCrum. So really delighted to have Jackie with us. It's fantastic to have such a senior civil servant speaking on such an important topic that impacts all women, will impact or is impacting all women in the civil service. And it's also important for those who work with women as well to have a bit of awareness and understanding of this particular issue. I'll be speaking on what we've heard from women. So through the Women's Health Taskforce, a big part of that has been hearing from women directly, and I'll be sharing what they said about menopause specifically. Then we'll have a video input from ICGP. So Noreen O'Hurley, who's the Assistant Medical Director and Director of Women's Health, and she's also a member of the Women's Health Taskforce. She's given a 5-minute overview of the menopause and different symptoms that can present, how it can present for different women, and different supports and different things that you can use to support you through your journey through the menopause as well. Then we're delighted to have with us Catherine O'Keefe, who's a wellness warrior, and she'll be speaking specifically to menopause in the workplace. So Catherine's got a wealth of experience as an advocate for menopause and has conducted some research with women specifically drawn from the employment lens. So really interested to hear that as well. And then last but not least, we'll hear from Susan Clark in the Civil Service Employee Assistance Service on the existing civil service supports and how HR is working to do better as well, to consider how else we can respond and support women through the menopause in the civil service. So really looking forward to today. Delighted you could all join us here today. And as mentioned, really looking forward to hearing your questions and comments as well. So please do keep them coming in too. So without further ado, I'll hand over now to Jackie McCrum for her opening words.
Thank you very much, Anna. I hope you can hear me. I'm delighted to be here this morning to open this event. Menopause, menstruation, mental health. Notice how all of the women's problems begin with men, or that's the title of a book I saw advertised by Amazon when I Googled this topic. I know we have many of our male colleagues on the call. You're all extremely welcome. This affects you, your families, and your colleagues. So I'm absolutely delighted that so many of you felt compelled to join. And I just should say this is a great one for a Monday morning, isn't it? You know, and a rainy Monday morning. But anyway, here we are. Let's go. Women's health and how it impacts us in the workplace is something which is beginning to get greater traction and the level of attention that it deserves. I'm delighted to see this event happening and that the civil service is dedicating some time for this important topic to look specifically at menopause at work and where there might be an opportunity for us to do better. So why menopause and why now? At every stage of a woman's life, health events can impact our lives, our family life, our social life, and our work life. It's essential that we can be our true selves in each setting. Just like everyone else, we should be able to both receive and provide support and understanding in each of these settings. The focus on women's health and the work environment has in the past been primarily dominated by pregnancy and accompanying maternity leave. It's as if we encountered no other life events. Equally, there has been a discomfort about talking openly about lots of health issues which impact how people, men and women, can fully participate in the workplace. For example, for far too long, it was taboo to discuss mental health and well-being. The work environment reflected wider society, but now I'm delighted to see more and more conversations happening in the workplace about our mental health and how we can protect it. Excuse me. Over my career, I've worked in a number of challenging and diverse environments, including the Department of Employment Affairs and Social Protection, the Office of the Ombudsman, and in my current role for the last year as the first female Secretary General of the Department of Defence. In each of these roles, I have worked with hugely talented and dedicated men and women who play an integral role in making this country what it is. We can see that work ethic reflected across the civil service. Excuse me. Excuse me now. So we can see that work ethic reflected across the civil service and the fact that almost 90% of people who interact with the civil service feel that their expectations are either met or exceeded. Whilst huge progress has been made during my working life to change ingrained practices and attitudes in society, which collectively hold back women and girls from achieving their true potential, more needs to be done. I have worked since I was 18 years of age with 12 weeks and 14 weeks maternity leave for both my children, Cameron and Freya, and that was all that was allowed at the time. I've had postnatal depression twice, and for my 50th birthday, I developed late onset type 1 diabetes, which results in about 5 injections a day of insulin. Somewhere in there, the menopause happened as well. I've said this before at talks. Am I superwoman? Most certainly not. Making changes and dealing with life's challenges is not easy. It requires effort, energy, drive, and tenacity to get there. You need your support team. You'll cry, at times you'll be on your knees, you'll meet resistance, you'll think of chucking it in, but the next day you dust yourself off and start again. Talking about the menopause should be a normal and natural conversation, both at home and in the workplace. Women actually make, excuse me, up the majority of workers in the Irish civil service. We need to begin this conversation to ensure we provide a supportive working environment for them and all colleagues and develop a culture of openness. I'm going to just take one more drink. The menopause can be a time of liberation and positivity, a time of positive change, new beginnings, and a new sense of freedom. Focus on the pluses. No more periods, adios to premenstrual syndromes, goodbye to those monthly headaches, no counting the 28 days in a month, sex without contraception or pregnancy worries, to name a few. Woo! I'd also like to say that this is your moment to reinvent yourself. It's the opportunity to get clear about what matters to you, and then to pursue that with all of your energy, time, and talent. So in talking today about the menopause, we are creating the understanding that it is a normal transitional stage in life that all women will go through. I know that by being open about our challenges and being human, we will normalise these types of conversations and make it easier for those facing challenges to ask for help and for colleagues to offer support. Working in the civil service means being part of the state's largest employee group, while also being your own customer as an Irish citizen. There is a real opportunity for us to lead the way in supporting our workforce, and by extension our colleagues, by looking at how we operate, opening up the conversation to understand how that might look differently for different people, and looking at how we can change things for the better. I'm very much looking forward to the presentations today from Anna, Catherine and Susan on the different topics they will offer. Before I hand over, when I was reflecting on what practical advice I could possibly give today, it is this. I'm going to show you one of the single best investments you'll make. Highly practical, very economical to buy, have one in the office, in the house, in the car and in the handbag. And I hope I can, this. The best thing to have ever, and to buy for a Christmas present if you need be. I'll hand over now to Anna, who will be speaking on the work of the Women's Health Taskforce And thank you very much for your patience today, and apologies for the coughing and spluttering.
That's fantastic, Jackie. Thank you so much. And I think that was a really nice opener, and really nice for you to share about your own personal experience as well, which is what we're all here about. Something that we've heard a lot through the Women's Health Taskforce and heard from women consistently is that lifting that lid on the conversation and just having an opportunity to share your story and your experiences with people who may have similar or different ones, to feel heard and listened to, is really important and really crucial. So thanks so much. Really, really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thanks.
And so for myself then, my presentation is going to speak specifically about what we've heard from women through the Women's Health Taskforce. So if we go on to the next slide there, and just the next one again. So just to give a bit of framing to it, women's health is a priority for the government, which is fantastic news. We know that women have specific physical, mental and social health needs. Women's health outcomes and experiences are affected by their roles in the family and society and their wider circumstances. So menopause is a really clear example of that. Menopause only happens to women. So it's a unique health experience, but yet one that all women will go through who live long enough. Combined with that, women face particular challenges can face particular challenges such as they are the majority of caregivers and other such health issues and things that can impact how they experience and access health services. So it's a complex picture, but it's something that we need to understand a little bit more. And progressing women's health is a priority for government. So it really strongly referenced front and centre in the programme for government, and really strongly supported in budget 2021 and 2022. So great to see, and we hope to drive even more progress in that area. So what is the Women's Health Taskforce then? So Women's Health Taskforce was established in 2019 to improve women's health outcomes and experiences of healthcare. And it really was set up to act on the evidence of gender inequality in health and to improve health outcomes for women. Really importantly, to meet women's expectations for the care and services that they receive. It goes some way to meet the commitments in the National Strategy for Women and Girls. So that's an overarching strategy to drive progress for women, and Women's Health Taskforce speaks to the health aspect of that. It demonstrates the Department of Health capacity to collaborate internally and outwardly with women, professionals, academics and others to develop effective policies. So again, making sure that we're listening and speaking to a wide range of people to ensure that we have that full picture. Importantly then, to respond to recommendation 2 of the report of the scoping inquiry into cervical check by Dr. Gabriel Scally, which said that the Minister for Health should give consideration to how women's health issues can be given more consistent, expert and committed attention within the health system and Department of Health. So that's a framing of why it was set up. So what have we been doing? So since 2019, we've been working with partners to improve health outcomes and health experiences. And menopause in particular has been one of 5 selected priorities over 2020 and 2021. And just to say at the outset that menopause will continue to be a priority in 2022 as well. So the 5 priorities were listening to women about health and healthcare, supporting women before and after menopause, improving women's gynecological health, increasing support for women to become and stay physically active, and planning better mental health supports for women and girls. If you want to find out any more information on Women's Health Taskforce, the link is there, but you could also just Google Women's Health Taskforce and the dedicated webpage will pop up. So what I'll be speaking about specifically today, if you want to go on to the next slide, is a combination of the first 2. So that big piece of work about listening to women about health and healthcare, and what we heard through the radical listening exercise, which I'll speak to a little bit more detail now, and what they said specifically about menopause. So it's a bit of a combination of those 2 things that I'll speak to today. So what was the radical listening exercise? The voice of women is really key. It's always been central to informing what the Women's Health Taskforce looks at and how it addresses issues. So we do that in a number of different ways. So lots of the work teams go out to speak to women and clinicians directly to hear what the issues are and what the solutions are from their perspective. But an additional piece of work was undertaken to really understand what the women of Ireland want to see in the health system and what they want to see changed. So to do that, a national radical listening exercise was completed to give women across the country the opportunity to share their views and experiences of the health sector and health services. And this has gone to underpin the work of the Women's Health Taskforce. So we heard from 278 women who contributed directly. This was in a combination of one-to-one interviews and group workshops. They were broadly representative of women in Ireland, and they range from women aged 18 to 65 plus. And they include women from a range of backgrounds, so minority, marginalized backgrounds, socioeconomic and urban rural backgrounds. So it's a broad representation of women in Ireland. And this is a focus on what they had to say specifically on menopause. So if you want to go on to the next slide. So this is just the title slide of the Radical Listening Project. This is published in September 14th. Some attendees might be interested to look at that. It captures kind of key takeaways that women want to see changed. And it's, again, that's accessible on the Department of Health website. So quite an interesting piece of work if people are interested in that. So the next slide is, this is specifically drawn from the report and the 46 to 6-year-olds. And you'll see in the slides that I'm going to speak to that menopause was the top topic for women. So the next slide, please. So people said that they were entering a challenging life stage with a lot of change and uncertainty ahead. So that was a really big takeaway that we heard from women. The really strong benefits that Jackie spoke to about, this is time and opportunity to tackle issues which perhaps were not given as much attention previously because of other commitments or other asks. And now their children are less dependent. They're hoping for a new lease of life and a renewal. But on the other side of things, there's perhaps health issues or challenging family situations that have become entrenched, and their own health may have become further deprioritized. Many women spoke of an identity struggle, felt like this was perhaps an isolating or lonely period where the families grow up and move on, and they have to reconnect with hobbies, interests, and pursuits. And then menopause came through really strongly. A lot of people were quite anxious about menopause, very uncertain, and they felt like it was a next big health journey. And they felt a little bit daunted about it. And we'll see from the next slide then that a lot of people spoke about it being very secretive, not spoken about anyone. They felt like they didn't have enough knowledge to equip them going into this next stage of life, that a lot of the information that they had was drawn from their mothers, their older sisters, or close friends, but this is all very anecdotal, and they felt it was very personal and sensitive. So women said that they felt the topic of menopause felt very secretive and closed, that it wasn't discussed in mainstream media, not discussed within peer groups, and not discussed in the workplace. So just to do a point of information, that this piece of research was conducted before the summer, and I'm sure, as everyone will be aware, there's been an explosion of attention across radio and across print media about the menopause and women's health issues, which is fantastic to see. And it speaks to what women want to see changed. And even this event itself, it's great to see many people attending. And all of this is the first step in terms of lifting the lid off menopause and making sure that people have that baseline of information and feel comfortable about discussing it. And just one final point in this slide is that the big point that we heard was just the lack of communication. So it felt like there was a taboo and a stigma, and that women felt really lonely and isolated in their journey. So for some people said that there was a sense that women were no longer valued in society or their health system once they were finished having children, and that they felt like women had to go through it alone, unsupported. So quite challenging messages there, ones that I hope are changing now and will be changing in the future, but good to pause and just to know that that was the snapshot of what we heard anyway. And the next slide then. So this is the last slide, and I suppose I'll finish off to counterbalance this slide, but just to highlight, not to diminish the challenges for women. So I think a lot of this, again, and this is also through speaking with women separate to this, that women feel like it's very, very physically challenging and very mentally challenging, but a lot of it is that they don't necessarily have that support network that Jackie spoke to, or they feel like it's too much taboo and stigma to find out or to discuss and feel more empowered about your menopause and know what's happening. So I suppose to counterbalance this last slide, to say that, as Jackie mentioned, it is definitely an opportunity to draft your life anew as well, to embrace that new phase of life, and that women have it. For instance, the Chinese refer to it as the second spring. So it's a new opportunity and phase of life. So Susan, I don't know if you want to come in there. But yeah, so that's just a snapshot in terms of what we heard. And so I suppose the big takeaways there are really that women have felt like menopause hasn't been discussed. It hasn't gotten enough attention to date. They want to see people speak about it. They want to share their experience, and they want to hear what other people have gone through. And they really want to know what to expect from the menopause in the next stage of life. And I suppose this is the first step in looking at that in the workplace context. So delighted to have this today. And to give that little bit of grounding in terms of the medical context of it, we'll go on to the ICGP overview of the menopause from Norina Hurley. So we'll go to this short video input now.
Good morning, my name is Dr. Noreen O'Hurley and I am a GP in Mallow and the Director of Women's Health with the Irish College of General Practitioners. I'd like to thank the Women's Health Taskforce for inviting me this morning, and I'm going to speak about menopause and when to seek help from your GP if your symptoms are troublesome. So what is menopause? Natural menopause takes place when the ovaries become unable to produce the hormones estrogen and progesterone. And so this leads to fluctuations in estrogen, progesterone, and another hormone called follicle stimulating hormone. And this leads to the symptoms that women experience. So menopause is the permanent cessation of periods. And we enter the post-menopause period when you're at least 12 months from your last period. The average age of menopause is 45 to 55 years. Some women experience a late menopause over the age of 55, and other women experience an early menopause, which occurs at the age of 40 to 45 years. And these women especially need to commence on hormone replacement therapy. Premature menopause is when menopause occurs at less than 40 years, and these women definitely require treatment. Perimenopause is the stage from the beginning of menopausal symptoms to the postmenopausal period. And it's during this time that you can experience many of the symptoms of the fluctuating hormones. So how might menopausal symptoms present? There are many different types of symptoms that you can get. So sometimes you'll get menstrual irregularities. For example, you might get heavy periods, or your periods may become less frequent. Your hair may become thin, or you might have dry skin, dry eyes, burning mouth. Some people develop headaches or migraines. Brain fog can often be a problem. Problems with word finding, poor concentration, lack of focus. Some people experience gastrointestinal symptoms such as bloating, dyspepsia, irritable bowel syndrome, constipation, and diarrhea. Mood changes can often be a problem, and the mood changes associated with menopause are often best treated with hormone replacement therapy or psychological therapies. Tinnitus and dizziness. Osteoporosis is something we need to be very aware of during the menopause, and certainly if you have a family history of osteoporosis or if you've experienced a fracture in the past, then treatment is important because osteoporosis can lead to hip fractures, which have a high risk of morbidity or mortality associated with them. Vasomotor symptoms are some of the symptoms that can be very distressing for women. Things such as hot flushes, night sweats, poor quality sleep. Joint pains are often a problem. And we must be aware of the increased risk of cardiovascular disease that women experience as their levels of estrogen reduce. And urogenital symptoms such as vaginal dryness or painful sex can often be a problem as well, and are easily treated if you contact your GP, and often do not require systemic HRT because we can provide estrogen as a cream. So it's very important to talk to your GP if you have any of these symptoms. So when you come to see your GP, they'll first advise you on your diet and lifestyle, advising on what you should do to maintain a healthy diet, such as reducing fatty foods and increasing your fruit and vegetable intake. Losing weight can also often help with hot flushes. Increasing your exercise is important to maintain your health and to reduce your menopausal symptoms. We advise you to stop smoking, reduce alcohol, and reduce your caffeine intake. But there are other more specific treatments that we can offer. Hormone replacement therapy is now often prescribed for women who have menopausal symptoms and has proven to be safe. In fact, they have proven that women who go on HRT less than 10 years from the commencement of their menopause have a reduced mortality compared to other people. But your GP will go through the risks and benefits of HRT with you, and you can come to a shared decision. Other non-hormonal treatments are also available. Psychological treatments such as cognitive behavioral therapy can be very beneficial, Medications such as selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which are a type of antidepressant, can sometimes be helpful with HRT symptoms. And there are also alternative options that you can discuss with your GP. So with the right supports, there is no need for women to press pause in their career during this natural transition. No longer having periods or worries about contraception can sometimes be a positive when it comes to the menopause. And some find that menopause is a time of positivity, creativity, and opportunity to change. But the most important message that we have today is to talk to your GP. And the ICGP would like to thank the Women's Health Taskforce, who are currently funding us to provide further education to GPs. And that has been one of the phenomenal occurrences in the past year, that there has been a huge demand within the ICGP as GPs are wanting to upskill in their skills and knowledge around menopause. So your GP really wants to be there for you and wants to help. So be sure to talk to them if you're experiencing troublesome symptoms with your menopause. Thanks for inviting me to speak this morning. Good morning.
That's great. Thanks so much to Noreen for contributing that. It's just a short overview of the menopause and what you need to know for a quick fire round. And I'll hand over now to Catherine O'Keefe, Wellness Aura. But just before I do, I'll just say I'm going to put in some resources to menopause information sites. So there's your Women's Health Concern, which is the British Menopause Society's patient arm, which has a wealth of information on a wide variety of topics such as hair loss, HRT, treatments or different options for you, and also Menopause Matters, which Noreen mentioned there in her last slide as well, which is an independent award-winning website as well, which also has a really wealth of information. So I'll put that links to those in a response to Alan O'Connor's question in the chat. Thanks very much. And over to you, Catherine. Thank you so much for being here today.
Great. Thanks, Anna. Hi, everyone. And I'm thrilled to be with you today. And thanks to the Women's Task Force for inviting me in. And, it's been really fantastic to hear the other voices today, and particularly Jackie starting off with such empowering words, because we know that menopause can be lonely. We know that support is essential when it comes to navigating your years through menopause. One of the big things that we look at when we come to menopause is the fact menopause has no boundaries. So it's not a 9 to 5, it impacts all aspects of our lives. So on that, I just want to share a story with you about Anne. And I just invite you in the chat box, if you can, whenever I mention a symptom, I'd love you just to type it in the chat box, and I'm going to write them up here as I see them coming up. So Anne was age 47, working in her job for many years. She was on a desk role, good track record, very happy and very sociable at work. But then all of a sudden, over a couple of months, things started to go off kilter. And Anne was suffering with lack of sleep. She wasn't sleeping very well, which meant that when her day started off, she was coming from a depleted state. Her tank was half full. She was exhausted. And when you're exhausted, it means that you mightn't make the same good, healthy food choices that you might make on a good day. So before she got into work, she was working from, a place of tiredness. And then not so much healthy food in her diet. Then she goes into a meeting, and the normal facts, the everyday facts that she knew that would roll off her tongue, well, they flew out the window. Brain fog, memory, concentration became an issue. And then it becomes a vicious circle because it impacts confidence and it impacts self-esteem. And the knock-on of both of those is that anxiety increases. And to add insult to injury, she was suffering from severe aches and pains. In Anne's story, and just the symptoms as I've mentioned, we've actually come across the top 5 symptoms that women are reporting as impacting in the workplace. One is insomnia, which leads to exhaustion. Excuse my writing. Which leads to brain fog, memory, concentration, not being able to remember the name of people or things or details, etc. Which triggers confidence, loss of confidence, loss of self-esteem, and the biggest impact of all of these three together is increased anxiety. And if I put a percentage on this, just based on the survey I did, the biggest factor that women reported as impacting in their workday was brain fog. So 78% of respondents cited brain fog as their biggest challenge in work. And then, you know, brain fog like that is your memory just isn't as sharp as it was. Your concentration, you can't maintain your concentration for the same length of time as you may have done in the past. But the biggest knock on then, the second top symptom is anxiety. And 66% of respondents cited anxiety as the second of the top 5 symptoms impacting work. And we know with anxiety, and Jackie mentioned support, etc. earlier, having support is crucial in your menopause journey. And often we find that if you don't have support and if you become more introverted, which is what also happened to Anne earlier, she was very, very sociable, but over a number of months, her manager actually realized she just became quieter. And there can be a tendency for many women to become a little bit quieter or withdrawn in menopause. And that's why reaching out and getting support is crucial. So later on today, Susan is going to talk about the Employee Assistance Survey. And I would really encourage you to utilize that because it's a completely confidential, independent resource that you can utilize. And if nothing else, it will just reaffirm, as Noreen explained earlier, menopause is normal. It's the hormonal change that happens in your body and you're okay. But if we just go back to the top 5, so brain fog, number 1, anxiety, number 2, and the loss of confidence was cited as number 3, with 60% of women stating this was their third impact. And then fourthly, we had actually aches and pains. I don't think I wrote that up there. And I see sleep is in there, we'll come to that. 4th was aches and pains at 47%. And then 5th, no surprise, was insomnia at, I think it is around 40, sorry, that was 40, aches and pains was 49% and 47%. What's interesting here, where's the hot flush? You know, now the night sweats, you can argue, can come in under the insomnia. The hot flushes are there and they do impact in the workplace. But for the majority of respondents, they only came lower. They came at about 38%. So these are the key symptoms that impact in the workplace: brain fog, anxiety, loss of confidence, insomnia, and aches and pains. Now, there's always going to be a caveat. If you're suffering, you know, from other issues like bladder issues, internal vaginal dryness and so forth, that may well be your guiding symptom or challenge at work. But for the majority of women, these are the biggest challenge. And if we just hone in just for a minute on insomnia, when we look at insomnia, I just want to break your day down into 24 hours. And if we look at it, what's my day broken into here? What am I looking at? And again, just type into the chat box there anything you think that your day is broken into. And thanks for those great comments. It's really interesting to see brain fog. You all hit on that one really quick, which just reinforces how common it is for women. So if we break our 24-hour day And we just go very roughly here. My biggest bucket here is sleep. And when it comes to menopause, I always say sleep is the bedrock of menopause, because it's so important to get sleep right. And it might be how there's many, many ways you can do that. You know, it's just looking at, Nori mentioned earlier, what are your supports? What can work for you? That can be HRT, can be alternative therapies. It's whatever works and supports you. One very important thing to remember with menopause, every woman will have a unique and individual journey. So your personal toolkit is going to be unique to you. But if we say roughly, we're spending 7 to 9 hours each night at sleep, then our other biggest factor is our workplace. And we'll just take an average of 8 hours in the workplace. And obviously it might be more, it might be lower, depending on what's happening and so forth. And then if we start breaking all of these down here, just very roughly, I can add like by the hour. I can say travel, I can say eating, I can say like domestic chores, you know, things you're doing at home. You know, I'd like to say that we put a nice chunk in there for exercise. We might have a period of time just to chill out. That might be just relaxing in front of Netflix and things like that. You might also have just some connection time where you're connecting with friends and family. And then you're going to have a bucket of other, and then it might be just more downtime, or however you think of filling it in. But the most important thing to see from this is these two here. How sleep, we're spending so much time, we should ideally be getting deep restorative sleep. And as one of the top 5 challenging symptoms in the workplace, we really need to make sure we get sleep right. If you get sleep right, it will help with your hot flushes, your anxiety, your night sweats, your brain fog, etc., etc. But it's look to the quality of your sleep. Look to how can you nourish your sleep? How can you make it better? Because it will have a direct impact on your workday, and it will also impact on other aspects of your life. I'm just going to share some slides with you now, just in terms of, Anna mentioned earlier, the survey and the work that I was doing recently, but I work with workplaces every day. So I see firsthand the challenges that women are facing. And yes, they may change from, you know, certain women will have different challenges. As we know, there's many symptoms of menopause, but really the one that poses the biggest challenge is the brain fog. But when I look at that, what I would really encourage you to think about is the fact, the knock-on impact of brain fog. So it's the loss of confidence, it's the loss of self-esteem, it's the impact on anxiety, and a vicious circle. Because if you become anxious, what's it going to impact? It's going to impact your sleep. You're not going to be able to sleep as well. You're feeling that little bit more stressed. So it's really important to manage your stress, to make sure that you've got tools in your life that are supporting you. And that's why I go back again to, you know, what are the supports? And I'm just going to share a slide with you now, and I'll just show you what most women reported as being their key support areas. So Anna, you might just give me a thumbs up that you can see this okay? Okay, I'll take it we're all okay. Yeah, great, thank you. So just some key findings to bring to you. So when I read the first one, the 80% still felt it was a taboo at work. I was like, oh God, really? Are we not making an impact? But you know what? I actually felt if I had run this survey 5 years ago, that figure would have probably been 99%. So, you know, I see it every day. We are making impact. The work, you know, so many women and men are doing across Ireland, it is making a change. You know, the work of the Women's Taskforce, you know, people like me and many others, GPs, etc. the change is happening. So the 80%, yes, it's high. We still have a long way to go, but we are slowly bursting the bubble. 76% of respondents felt COVID helped with virtue for the fact that they worked from home. And one of the biggest items there was the fact that Jackie earlier had her fan, which I had a great chuckle over, because with COVID, that's what many women reported, the fact they were able to control the air conditioning. They could open a window, they could turn on the heating, they could turn off the heating however they wanted, because we know our internal thermostat changes dramatically as we go through menopause. So, COVID has definitely helped many. I think the transition back into hybrid working will be a challenge for many women too. And 53% of women felt there was a lack of understanding in the workplace around menopause. And the good thing is, it's like talks like this today, and I know there's going to be more follow-on from this. This is how you open and support the conversation. It's educating everybody, men and women, in relation to menopause. And earlier I mentioned about your employee assistance survey, which I would really encourage you to utilize. 66% of respondents said they never used the employee assistance program, which I really just felt it's a shame, because it's wholly confidential, it's free, and it's available to you at work. So I'd really encourage you to look at that. And if you do look at it, ask for a CBT therapist, a cognitive behavioural therapist. We know from the Women's Health Concern and the British Menopause Society that CBT is one of the most successful therapies in relation to many of the menopause symptoms, particularly hot flushes, night sweats, anxiety, and some other aspects. So that's a brilliant one to look at. And you can just request a CBT therapist. Just in terms of the impact of the symptoms on the workday, 62% of women said it had mild to moderate impact, while 19% said it had an extreme impact on the day. And that's a high figure. So that's where we really need to look at how do we support. And one of the key supports that came back was manager training, to increase the awareness, have education for all employees, and then also to look at manager training as well. And then I know there was, some comments there in the chat box, I think, about, what else can you do outside of HRT? Well, there's many things you can do, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But before we go on to that, the support of menopause at work can be very practical. Like Jackie had the fan earlier, so practical, but you can buy electrical fans as well. Just bear in mind when it comes to fans that it's not necessarily just the upper part of the body. You may actually need a fan by your feet as well. So just thinking outside of the box, and how can you support, yourself or your colleagues in the workplace. So 65% of women said they would love to have a rest area, quiet space. And that really hones in on the brain fog and the anxiety. Because when you're experiencing both of those, what you need to do is pause. You need to take a moment. So it is great if you can have, a quiet space to just chill for a few minutes. And then fans, 50%. And here's a really interesting, very practical change that can be made. The cafeteria and the vending machine. So 33% said they'd love to see better food in the canteen, and 28% better options in the vending machine. That's an area I've been working with a lot of workplaces over the last year, is simply looking at the cafeteria menu and kind of seeing, okay, can we tweak this a bit? Can we introduce, better foods or more supportive foods? And then with the vending machine, can we strip out maybe the high intense sugar-loaded snacks that are there, and maybe replace it by, nuts and seeds and just more healthier options. And then finally, 23% said they would love to see shower facilities included in their workplace. Now, they're just some of the top items that came up. And as you can imagine, there's many other things that you can incorporate. But what have women reported that they find really helps? And this is where, I think everybody has said so far today, the word support comes up, and it's something that it's so crucial in menopause. And that support can come in many guises. It can be your line manager, it can be your work colleague, it can be HR, it can be the employee assistance service, your GP, your consultants. There's many places where you can get your support. But the key is, and Jackie referred to this earlier, is get your tribe. Find your support network and bring it all together so that it's supporting you in work and outside of work. I always say menopause is it's a community initiative. It needs support on all aspects. So it needs support by the employer, by our community groups, by our friends, by our family, etc. It's not just left to a person on their own. So what have women reported that helps them through these years? Well, the first thing that came up was 67% of respondents had found supplements, that they'd started to use supplements and that they were finding these of great benefit. And 48% had increased exercise. So they were doing more exercise, which is brilliant, because we know exercise ticks, I'd say 99% of the symptoms of menopause. It will support you. And that exercise doesn't have to be, rock climbing or abseiling. It doesn't have to be intense. We can keep it to brisk walking, Pilates, yoga, Tai Chi, particularly the exercises that are supporting our bones are a huge benefit. But exercise is key. And, as Noreen had in her slides earlier, it's looking at bringing the lifestyle pieces together, because no matter what you do here, it's going to be a myriad of bits of everything. It's not one size fits all. And then the third part of it was mindfulness and meditation actually came up very high at 42%. And, so again, where that is really important is managing stress. There's one area of your life that you need to be very mindful of when it comes to thriving through menopause, is managing your stress. So it's looking at how do you support yourself every day to keep things on an even keel. And it's looking at the stressors. And one of the big ones is technology. I see that every single day. So be mindful of your technology time. Be mindful of different aspects of your life that I refer to as nutrient robbers. That can be excess alcohol, smoking, too much caffeine, etc. So it's just really trying to support yourself to thrive through these years. And then fourth, we had HRT at 39%. And I think the brilliant thing is that there is more education and more awareness around HRT today. And like Anna and Noreen mentioned earlier about that, there's more funding being given to GPs to do training. I mean, that we need that. It is so important. And I've seen firsthand how GPs across the country are going, to extra lengths to enhance their knowledge. And that is really crucial, because look, every person that comes into their clinic is going to have a different experience. So HRT can work beautifully for one person, maybe contraindicated for personal medical reasons for another person, or for personal reasons, it just may not be an option. So it's really great to see so much education coming in relation to HRT, because it has changed dramatically from what it was, 10, 15 years ago to what it is today, the different forms and so forth. But it's really important to understand the options that you have when it comes to HRT. So when you do sit down with your GP, you can have a very empowering, informed conversation. And then the fifth one was 26% of respondents said they were using alternative therapies. So that would be like, reflexology, acupuncture, herbalism. I mean, the list is endless. But one of the key things that I will say is when we look at all of these, it's bringing it all together. Because I've worked with women who've used HRT and they love supplements, they love exercise, they might be doing alternative therapies as well, they'd be doing meditation. Or conversely, you can have people who are just doing HRT, or you can have people who are just doing supplements. It's never one size fits all. And when it comes to supporting yourself in the workplace, it's really important to understand that it's your journey and it's unique to you. One other area that I just like to touch on, and supporting it in the workplace is essential. Barack Obama famously was a huge supporter of menopause when he was in the Oval Office. And, he was very, very relaxed and calm about it, probably because Michelle was going through menopause at the same time as he was in office. But, he was very much like, open the windows, turn on the air conditioning. What can we do? Let's keep it practical. That's what we need to do in workplaces. We need to keep it practical. And practical, it doesn't have to be expensive. The practical changes in the workplace can actually be very inexpensive. It's promoting the employee assistance program. It's promoting support. And I would also say, when it comes to that, it's opening the conversation to support yourself within the workplace. And that may be starting with your line manager. And just a few top tips in relation to that conversation. The first thing is give notice. It's a really good idea to just send an email, and you could just say, hi Mary, can I sit down with you next Monday? I'd like to talk about some menopause symptoms I'm experiencing. What that does is you're opening the doors to a collaborative, supportive conversation, because you're giving Mary time to make sure. Mary might be younger. Mary may not have experienced menopause yet. So it's giving her time to prepare herself to understand what menopause is and what it's all about. And then before you have that meeting, prepare. The brain fog will be there in some guys or not, and the anxiety will make the brain fog that little bit more intense. So prepare for the conversation. Role play it in front of Zoom, or with a friend or partner, or just in front of the mirror, and write down the top 2 to 3 parts of your menopause that you feel are challenging at work. And when you write them down, beside them have a solution. For example, if it is hot flushes, then maybe it's a desk fan. Maybe it's just being comfortable with having your own fan. Maybe it's a floor fan. It's looking at what you can do to support yourself to thrive through these years. And one of the things we know, particularly if we look at Japan have a fantastic way of looking at menopause. They refer to it as Kanenkai, and that loosely translates as renewal, years, and energy. Just think about that. Renewal, years, and energy. That's a much more supportive way of looking at menopause than, some of the aspects of the West are that little bit heavy. And Jackie touched on this earlier, once you get your tribe together, once you understand what your supports are, and those supports can look very varied, as I mentioned. It may be HRT, it may be supplements, it may be alternative therapies, it may be your lifestyle options. So, getting good sleep, managing stress, and being connected, the most important support. But when you bring all of these together, that's your personal toolkit. And if you can bring all of these together in an empowered and informed way, you are setting yourself up for renewal. You are setting yourself up to thrive through these years. But the essential starting point is getting a handle on your symptoms and getting the support that you need in work, outside of work, in every aspect of your life. When it comes to anxiety and menopause, we know one of the most common forms of anxiety is social anxiety. As I mentioned earlier, women can become a little bit more introverted, a little bit more withdrawn, like Anne was in the story I told you earlier. So it is really of great importance to stay connected. Make sure you meet your friend for coffee. Make sure you go out for the odd dinner. Make sure you go to the cinema. Just do different social things. Keep your relationships fresh, as in, have new relationships, have new hobbies. bring things into your life that stimulate your brain growth. And that is really important. We know 2 out of 3 dementia and Alzheimer patients are women. We need to protect ourselves in our 40s and in our 50s. We need to future-proof ourselves for those later years, because look, we're all living longer, which is fantastic. We want to make sure we're living longer in a healthy way where we're at optimum health. But one of the key takeaways, if you can take it from today, is have support at work. You know, the conversation is opening. Now you can open it further if you want to by reaching out and accessing either support through your EAP or through your line manager. But I would really encourage you to get your toolkit together, get your tribe together to make sure you thrive through these years. We have one life, and it's really important that we live it at our best. So I'll hand you back now to Anna, and I think we've got some time later on for Q&A.
Great, thank you so much, Catherine. That was a fantastic input. And you can see from all the Q&As and all the comments from people who attended that really resonated with everyone who attended. And some great questions are coming in there as well. So really fantastic to see that level of engagement. So I am handing over now to Susan Clark, who will speak a little bit more about the civil service supports.
Thank you very much, Anna. And thank you so much, Catherine. I really enjoyed your segment. I think your opening about menopause not having any boundaries is really poignant. And the fact that hot flushes, which seems to be always associated with the menopause, did not make the top 5 of the challenging symptoms. But it's so heartening that the psychological symptoms are getting airtime and being brought more to the fore, and how all these symptoms interact with each other. So I just want to say thank you. Indeed, I learned a lot from all our speakers here this morning. And I think despite the fact that we're talking about the challenges of menopause and it's a Monday morning, and it's a bit dreary, I found this whole session to be very positive. So we in the CSCAS were absolutely delighted to be here and part of this conversation today and at this event, such an important event to mark World Menopause Day. Some time ago, we were approached by Anna and the Women's Taskforce to discuss this topic and look at ways of raising awareness around menopause, and specifically around menopause in the workplace. So to see this event realised is absolutely marvellous. As Anna said, by the volume of attendees, there's a real appetite to have this very important conversation around the menopause. So who we are, the Civil Service Employee Assistance Service, is a confidential support service there to provide emotional and practical support to all civil servants for both work and personal related issues. And the whole ethos of an employee assistance service is about ensuring that we work collaboratively with the person in a very solution-focused way to progress them on their journey, to assist them in overcoming challenges that they're experiencing. We know that the civil service is a very large organisation. Jackie alluded to this in her speech, and therefore there's bound to be a considerable percentage of people in it who must be experiencing menopausal symptoms. Jackie mentioned there in her opening remarks that women make up the majority of the civil service workforce. So we had a conversation internally. We spoke, and I know, Catherine, you spoke about this a little bit in your segment, but what was quite striking when we had these conversations internally in the CSCAS about the menopause is it's not something that's often or readily discussed, even still. We're a service who supports civil servants with a vast array of issues, both in personal work lives, issues to do with relationship difficulties, health diagnoses, conflict, work-life balance issues, stress and anxiety, all reflective of all the challenges we all face. But the challenges that menopausal symptoms may bring are not, it seems, explicitly discussed. And the symptoms that don't often get as much attention, the psychological symptoms, can have the most profound impact and are the ones that can affect a person's emotional well-being. And I know, Catherine, you mentioned how insomnia causing exhaustion, leading to brain fog and lowering self-esteem, all contributing to that increased anxiety. And I was really quite shocked to learn that 66% of respondents said that anxiety, that was the second biggest impact on them in the workplace. And that's phenomenal. So indeed, I'm sorry, just to move on then, indeed in the CSCS, we don't collect specific data around the menopause. And as I mentioned on the foot of this, because we don't have hard data, I spoke to our team for anecdotal feedback as to what our clients are telling us And it was quite stark. We have a significant number of people in their 40s and 50s availing of our service, but it's very rarely mentioned. I think what was said was the feedback I received, oh, it's mentioned once or twice. And when it's mentioned in a one-to-one session, it's raised as an aside, really. It's not the prevalent issue, it's not the presenting issue. So we realize that this is not a conversation that we're having with our clients, and it's not something our clients are explicitly saying to us. And we're a support service. Anna mentioned about women being daunted about the menopause, deeming the next stage to be something that they almost dread, feeling like this anxiety around this that's not spoken about must be such a big burden. Given these demographics that we've spoken about, there are many women who are experiencing challenges associated with this transition. And we know from studies done in the UK that one particular study I was reading about, it mentioned, it alluded to the fact that 60% of respondents stated that the menopause impacted them, but that they also did not feel confident in speaking with their line manager. And Catherine, your research mentioned that 80% of people still felt it was a taboo subject in the workplace. So this research tells me, I suppose, that people are quite anxious about it. They're forced to take time off work or cut their hours or even leave their jobs due to suffering symptoms, but also not having enough support, or they perceive there not to be enough support. So we in the CSES, the Civil Service Support Service, wanted to be part of this journey to ensure that we were part of the overarching conversation, that we were part of initiating this conversation, not only with our one-to-one clients, but also with our organizational clients, departments and offices, educating ourselves and others to ensure that we're a truly meaningful support, a listening ear, and a source of information that for anyone experiencing challenges as they embark on this stage. We want people to feel confident and reassured in coming to us for support. So as I mentioned, it's very heartening that the psychological symptoms are now being discussed, and there is widespread education now driven by the emerging specialist menopause clinics and services, which we as the CSCS are now tapping into. We obviously know, and Catherine spoke a lot about this, about the menopausal transition. It can be a tumultuous time for mental health, not only just due to the hormonal fluctuations, but also we feel partly attributed to the psychosocial changes that often occur around this transition, such as alterations in family structure and dynamics, role transitions, and lack of social supports. And one of the things that made me think, and actually, Catherine, I was delighted to hear about the fact that in your research it pointed to the fact that there was many benefits that COVID brought with the working from home. But I did think, over the last 18 months with the challenges of the pandemic, and you're talking about lack of control and containment strategies and lockdowns and isolation and trying to manage home life and work life, that I would only imagine might exacerbate stress and anxiety that may manifest during this transition. When I was reading about menopausal symptoms and specifically around mental health, I was curious as to how they manifested and how and why, and what were the interactions. And I mentioned the psychosocial elements and the fluctuating hormones, but I was also curious as to how they interact with the brain. And I watched this brilliant TED talk on how our brain changes and interacts with the hormone fluctuations. But the fact is, and I think this is the message I took from it, the fact is our brains, just as the rest of our bodies do, it transitions, and it needs that space and time to adjust. We in the CSCS were very conscious that this period is different and experienced differently for everyone. As mentioned previously, the menopause can impact emotional, psychological health. So we're talking about low mood, greater than normal anxiety, maybe perhaps feeling overwhelmed, anger. Catherine, you mentioned the reduced self-esteem. And all of this compounded by the loneliness, especially if one is not able to, or feels they're not able to open up and discuss their experiences and seek support. One particular journalist wrote recently that from her interviews, it was clear that for the worst part for many was not necessarily just the symptoms, but actually having to keep it to themselves because they didn't feel seen, heard, or understood by those around them. So this moves me then on to talk about how the CSCS can support. I strongly believe that as a service, we're poised to play a major role on improving the workplace experience for all experiencing menopausal symptoms. Obviously, we provide one-to-one support. And while not all women experience mood changes or anxiety, it's about feeling comfortable speaking about their own symptoms and knowing who they can turn to talk, which can help remove the stigma or indeed help eradicate some of the isolation. The CSES provides access to one-to-one support for a wide range of issues affecting one's mental and emotional health. And as they go through the transition, this menopausal symptoms, we can utilize techniques such as mindfulness, meditation techniques, and CBT strategies to assist one in their journey. We're there to provide a non-judgmental listening ear and can be used merely as a sounding board. We will continue to work closely with the Women's Taskforce and all women's networks in the department and offices that we serve. All our staff will be trained up on appropriate approaches and indeed appropriate language, and will be versed in all the up-to-date information and research from credible sources. So we encourage all those experiencing any of the challenges or any of the anxiety around the menopause to see the CSEAS as an additional tool in their own personal toolkit. Our role is also there to raise awareness. Anna, you mentioned about the perception of it being a taboo subject, and I know, Catherine, you alluded to the research about it being a taboo subject in the workplace. So this obviously there's been an explosion in the media of late around this topic, and it's fantastic to see the increased attention encouraging those to speak openly about the impact of their symptoms. And I feel this increased awareness is only going to help build a more supportive and open workplace. The CSES, we can bring awareness around through our promotional campaigns, targeted training and events, and engaging in the conversations that, I must add, are already happening in many of our departments and offices. We're delighted to continue to work with the Women's Taskforce and collaborate where we can. We too will be working with our colleagues in One Learning to run a pilot training for HR representatives from a variety of different departments. I think we have Department of Health, Department of Defence, and Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, to name but a few, signed up. The Women's Task Force will be facilitating this, and we look forward to evaluating this pilot and hopefully opening this up and running it for all. Also today, to mark World Menopause Day, the CSES are delighted to launch a support section on our website, and notification of this will be circulated around to all the departments today. So my colleagues in the CSES created this online hub. It's an evolving library of information, and also support links on this topic, and it's envisaged that it'll be a living hub, regularly updated and added to as time goes by. But just to circle back to Jackie's opening comments about having this conversation and accessing a support network, and Anna speaking about the importance of the woman's voice and the outcomes of the radical listening exercise, and then Catherine's research and her session in relation to having a personal toolkit. And from everyone here today, and indeed even at the start of my own piece, we're delighted to be part of this conversation. We need to learn from you about your experiences to inform all of our work. So now to finish up, I'd like to invite you to share what has helped you in your menopause journey at work through contributing through menti.com. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Susan. So again, just to sum up, to say thanks so much to everyone who spoke today. And I see from the comments that people appreciate it. So it's great to be able to have this event and to have this opening event to mark the discussion on menopause at work in particular. For those of you who may not be familiar with Menti, just to let you know that this is, so it's an interactive way of capturing your thoughts so you can all see it together. So just to put it out there to see, what did you find helpful in managing your menopause journey in the workplace? You might see it switch for a moment because my colleague will be switching to the live version as opposed to this one. But just to say that, as Susan mentioned as well, we're really interested to hear what your experiences have been, because it is a journey for us. So you can hear even from this point last year to now, the amount of awareness and public discussion on menopause has increased a huge amount, which is fantastic. But I remember when we were reaching out to women to speak about menopause and to hear what they experienced, what they'd like to see changed. People were telling me that they worked in healthcare settings and that they had no real knowledge or understanding of the menopause because it was such a taboo subject, and they would return back home to their workplace, again filled with healthcare professionals and full of women who are all in the appropriate age range, and again very little awareness, and people didn't really they'd heard kind of anecdotal bits or kind of comments, but there wasn't any real discussion about what challenges they faced or what they found helpful for them. So I think just as an opening event, it's fantastic to see, and it's great to hear here, just in terms of to inform the civil service context in particular, because as Susan mentioned, we're going to be running that pilot program for HR training for HR units and departments as well, to take a look at how we're currently supporting women through the menopause in the civil service and where we could do better. So I know that there was a few comments in the Q&A about different departments and how that might look differently. So just to say, we will have, this is preempting the training and what they might find, but just to say that it may look differently across different departments because there's different limitations, but everyone's going into it with open minds, and they're here to listen. And this is where all of your contributions here today will be really important as well. So it's a really great opportunity to take a snapshot of what is working well. So to highlight the best practice and to see how we can spread that around and see if we can make that a standard for everyone to have a supported journey through the menopause. Because as you know, women who are going through the menopause are at the pinnacle of their career. They have such great experience and wealth and knowledge, and it's important that we keep them as an asset to keep contributing and keep building the civil service, as Jackie mentioned, to build it into a really strong and productive, which it is, and the really great quality work that we do produce, and making sure that we help everyone to continue to do that as well. So just as we were looking through that, I might just go to Jackie if you're there, just to see if you wanted to give any final thoughts or summary from your point of view.
Thanks very much, Anna. I'm surprised I survived. That's the big thing. When you look at all of the symptoms that are there that Catherine called out, and probably, I'm not sure I've had them all on the one day, but I've certainly encountered some of them at some of the times. And I think that brain fog thing is something that occurs at different times, depending on what's going on in your life. It can happen as well, if you've got a bereavement, and sometimes after, you come back after having children and you're just trying to settle in, and all of those changes in your life. I think what we've got to do is probably, I think a great thing from today is that we're going to acknowledge it, that it happens, and not to be afraid of it. And I think everybody has to find their own way of managing this, because not one size fits all. So what suits one person may not suit another. But it's good to have that conversation and chat. And just an interesting thing I saw yesterday, when again I was Googling away to try and see what the latest chat on this was. It came across this website that was talking about periods, and it was a whole page about how to style yourself during periods. And when I think back to when I started having periods, that definitely wouldn't have been discussed. So there's lots of help online, and I think just even having that another colleague, whether it's male or female, in the workplace as well, that you can kind of just say, oh, for God's sake, this is today now, I'm just having a moment. And we all have those moments. So look, I think it's something that's there. We have to go through it. I do think it's very liberating. So I wouldn't be afraid of it. And I wouldn't be sitting there waiting for it to happen. So just let it happen naturally, and find how you can deal with it best. Confide in colleagues, and keep on using the services that we have here as well.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Jackie, and thanks so much for being with us here today. It's great to have your voice to this as well.
No, very good, and thank you very much. It was an excellent. They were all excellent presentations, so well done. And I think you've got excellent attendance, which is even more impressive for a Monday morning.
Yeah. Yes. Thanks to everyone who took time out today to attend. And there's just one question in the chat that I might go to you, Catherine, in relation to the supplements. I think it was branched off from your presentation.
I think, yeah, there was quite a few questions asking about the supplements. Just one thing to say on that is, look, please, food first. Food is so important, and I'd really when I say food, I'm really talking about loads of fresh fruit and vegetables, because we know when you've got a lot of fiber in your diet, it basically means your bowels are working really well, and that means any toxins and everything are being moved, through the body, and you're not having a build-up. Because if your bowels aren't working well, what's the first thing that happens? You feel exhausted. So it's really important. Loads of fresh fruit and vegetables. Your best friends in these years are nuts and seeds. And 3 of the best seeds in menopause are pumpkin, flax seeds, and chia seeds. I use them on soups, I use them on my breakfast, I use them in smoothies, I use them wherever I can. So really kind of look at the food aspects that you can really bring in to nourish yourself. And just one thing on that, and there was some comments, I think, about someone who said they'd reduce caffeine. Watch the caffeine intake. Caffeine exasperates anxiety, it exasperates hot flushes, insomnia, brain fog, etc. So just watch the caffeine intake, and more water is what you need. But when it comes to supplements, you're really looking at, you want to cover off as much as you can with your food and then top it up with the supplements. And that could be, magnesium tends to be one of the best things to look at, particularly in the early menopause years. But I'd really say is there's many forms of magnesium as there's many forms of supplements. So just do your research, look for an ionic form of magnesium citrate. That's the best one to look at. And then some other big parties are the B vitamins, particularly B6 and B12, huge benefit. And then you have like zinc, really good for the immune system, because we know the immune system comes under pressure. It's very typical in the early perimenopause years that when you're still having cycles, that your immune system dips just before a period. It might be that you feel a bit of a head cold coming on. That's very common. So you want to be supporting the immune system, and zinc is really good for that. So B vitamins, zinc, soy isoflavones you can look at as well, which work like phytoestrogens, but just to be very clear, they're not the same as HRT. They're never going to be the same strength. And then vitamin D is very important, and omega-3. So you're ideally trying to look for a supplement that's going to bring all of that together. Or if you're experiencing anxiety, then look specifically. You could be looking at something like rhodiola. It's very good to calm the nervous system. Or a really good tip for everybody is, in most supermarkets, Dunnes, Super Value, etc., they sell a tea called Tulsi Clarity. Tulsi Clarity reduces cortisol, so helps with stress, and that can be really beneficial for insomnia and so forth. When you're looking at kind of the world of supplements, it is huge, but it's really important to understand what benefits you. And when you take a supplement, don't just keep taking it because it becomes a habit. Take it as long as it supports you. For most supplements, you'll know within a week or two if it's working for you and if it's supporting you. And, I really encourage people, to take a break at some point, because you want to know that you're getting benefit from the supplement and that it's helping you. So hopefully that helps, Anna.
That's great. Thanks, Mia and Catherine. Susan, I just wonder if you want to say some final words as well, just in relation to CES. I see there in the comments that someone mentioned the support in the CES, so great to see that as well.
Sorry, I'm having a few technical difficulties. Absolutely. I just want to say again that I just really enjoyed today's session immensely. And I think, I suppose the message that's being conveyed here very strongly today is, first of all, you're not alone. And secondly, that there are supports out there to help you build your own personal toolkit. I think for anyone going through this, you may not feel like yourself right now, because there's obviously major shifts going on in relation to how your mind and body works, and that can lead to people feeling overwhelmed, but there is support there. There is support and work, and I think it's all about cultivating self-compassion in all of this as well. And I think that, that we mentioned about the importance of mindfulness and CBT strategies, but there's also an element of self-compassion as well. So I would encourage anyone who are, if they're experiencing any of the challenges or want to talk about it, want to have a listening ear, want to even, as I said, use this as a sounding board prior to even speaking to their own line manager, that we're there to provide that support and assistance to everyone.
Great, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Susan. And just to say, there's a huge amount of questions there. We're not going to be able to get through all of them. There are a number that are specific to you individually. So just I'll repeat what I said at the start in terms of your own menopause will and may look differently for you than from another woman. So just to underscore the importance of speaking to your GP about what works for you in particular. But absolutely, those other websites that I've mentioned as well, the Women's Health Concern in particular, and the menopauseMatters.co.uk. Both of those are really comprehensive in terms of, and really trusted, which is quite important in terms of menopause as well, for a range of topics and information that the people have mentioned here. So that they speak to things like HRT, what types of HRT are available, if it's suitable for you, complementary therapies, insomnia, hair loss, restless leg syndrome, a range of different things like that. So I would really encourage people to go look at those if you are interested. And we will put a list of the ones that I've mentioned, because I know I've been highlighting a good few links there, but they've been primarily drawn from that. So Women's Health Concern is the main one I'd mentioned there, and Menopause Matters is another one there. And we're just about 8 minutes away from the end, but I think we've come to a natural enough end. So what I might do is I will leave the chat open, and I'll leave the page open, just so people can share additional thoughts and input there. And just to say as well, if you want to put in any comments or questions in the Q&A, we'll have a look at those and try to respond to them. And also any ideas for additional things that you'd like to see. So I saw someone mention there that they'd like to see a topic on heavy periods. So is there any other taboo topics on women's health that you'd like to see covered? So we'd love to hear that from you as well. So please feel free to comment that in the Q&A, or else directly to Women's Health Taskforce at health.gov.ie. So just to say thanks so much for everyone who came along as well. It's really fantastic to have everyone here and contributing and engaged, and it's a great start. And as Susan mentioned, we hope to do more of those in the future. So watch this space, and we'll get back to you again. All right, have a lovely week, everyone.